The Oregon Ducks are the number one team in the land, and they're battling with the Indiana Hoosiers on top of the Big Ten standings. What's going on? Locked on Big Ten starts right now.
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Big Ten. I'm Craig Sheetman, coming up on 40 years as a sports talk show host and play-by-play announcer. And I want to thank you for making us your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So the Big Ten's Oregon Ducks are number one. Indiana joins the Ducks at 7-0 on top of the standings. We'll take a look at every team, every game from this weekend for a quick recap and some thoughts moving forward, plus our top 10 Big Ten observations from the weekend. See if your top observation made my list. That's all coming up in just a minute. So the weekend started on Friday, right, with Oregon, a Friday night game, coming off their big Ohio State win, and they go into Purdue. They weren't flat. They weren't jet lagged, long trip, short week. It wasn't one of those games that you overlook because Purdue's a lesser opponent coming off the Ohio State win. They took 3 minutes to march down the field and score their opening touchdown to take a 7-0 lead. They look very sharp. And defensively, and I know Purdue has struggled to put it together offensively, but Oregon, that was their first road shutout in 30 years. Cam Alexander with an interception in that game as well. After the win on Friday, they fly home and get to do a little scoreboard watching on Saturday night when Georgia beat number one Texas. The Ducks, who are number two in the rankings at the time, were poised to become the number one team in the country, and that they did, with the Associated Press releasing the top 25 list on Sunday. The Ducks are the number one team in the country. Got 59 first place votes, all but two of them. Two people voted for Georgia, by the way. Georgia moved up to number two. Penn State with the bye week remained at 3. Ohio State with the bye week remained at number 4. Texas falls from number 1 all the way to number 5. Miami at 6. Tennessee up 4 spots to number 7 after beating Alabama. LSU remains at 8. Clemson 9. And Iowa State at 10. Indiana moved up 3 spots to number 13. I thought they might crack the top 10. I think they should have cracked the top 10. I definitely think Indiana is a top 10 team in this country. Might have to wait another week or two, I guess. They're at 13, though. And Illinois moved up 2 spots to number 20 after beating Michigan. So let's talk about all this. By the way, the Ducks have now a top 20 matchup. As I mentioned, Illinois, number 20. The Ducks host Illinois this upcoming weekend. Should be a great football game. And then they've got their trip to Ann Arbor after that against Michigan, a team that fell out of the top 25 altogether. So the Ducks are great. They're flying high. They're at the top of the conference. They're at the top of the country, top of the rankings. They are good to go. Also 7-0, the Indiana Hoosiers. Nebraska came into Bloomington this weekend. Nebraska's a good football team. We talk all about them a lot here. Dylan Raiola, the defense, Matt Rule. They got absolutely destroyed by the Hoosiers. The Hoosiers had another offensive output. I mean, the Hoosiers had a minimum score 40 points and put 400 to 500 yards up every single week, and they did it again here. 56-7. This is against a 5-win team in Nebraska. Indiana scored 7 touchdowns in its first 9 drives. Offense averaged almost 9 yards a play. They didn't even punt till about 6 minutes to go in this game. It was remarkable. The Hoosiers have yet to trail this season. There was some criticism going into this game that they really hadn't played anybody. The schedule was a little bit soft, and it was. And so Nebraska was a really good, true test for them, a team that has been in and out of the top 25. As I said, a good football team. And Indiana just manhandled them. Absolutely. Indiana's yet to give up any first quarter points, so they come out ready to play. First-year head coach Curt Cignetti has never had a losing season in his entire coaching career. He's not going to now. He's got 7 wins already. Curtis Rourke is just a phenomenal quarterback for this offense. Now, there's a little concern here. He hurt his thumb, basically ripped the thumbnail off the thumb and didn't play in the second half. Taven Jackson, who was a holdover from the Tom Allen regime, he came in and completed 7 of 8 passes in the second half for 91 yards and 2 touchdowns. So they just kept rolling. You got Justin Ellison, rushed for over 105 yards and 2 touchdowns. 10 different players caught passes. On defense, 3 players had interceptions in this game off of Dylan Raiola, who does a pretty good job of taking care of the ball. So good job by the Hoosiers defense there. Here's another thing that'll just hit you right in between the eyes. Nebraska, through the first half of the season, had given up 0 rushing touchdowns all year. Pretty good defense. Indiana scored 5 rushing touchdowns on them in one game. It was incredible. As I alluded to, they've put up 400 yards and at least 31 points every game this season. They had over 500 yards in this game, but they did a couple of kneel downs in victory formation that got them below the 500 once they were already there. But they did just everything right on Saturday. The Hoosiers now host Washington next week. If you do the math here, if the Hoosiers beat Washington, and then if they win at Michigan State the following week, although Michigan State looked better against Iowa Saturday night, they could go into the Ohio State game with a 10-0 record. I'm putting that out there in the universe in case we start heading down that direction. We'll be talking about it here on Lockdown Big Ten. All right, elsewhere around the Big Ten, Michigan and Illinois. Illinois wins 21-7. It's Illinois' first win over Michigan since 2009. Illinois, it was their 3rd win over a ranked opponent this year. Pretty good. Maybe they should be ranked a little higher than 20th for that. They're in the mix. We talk about Oregon and Indiana being 7-0. Illinois is 6-1. By the way, I loved the faux leather helmets they wore this weekend. They were painted 3D. Took 2 hours to paint each helmet, hand painted, to make them look like leather helmets to celebrate the 100-year anniversary of their stadium, Memorial Stadium, and the 100th anniversary of the Galloping Ghost Red Grange's 6-touchdown game against Michigan in 1924. Illinois started up with an opening drive, 3-0, and then it was a defensive battle. It was like it was an old school game, not the Red Grange kind where he just scored 6 touchdowns, but the olden days, leather helmets, low scoring, the forward passes just wasn't a thing. Luke Altmaier did not have a particularly outstanding day passing, and Michigan does it. Jack Tuttle, the 3rd starting quarterback for Michigan this year, playing in the second game, his first start, he was horrible. He just turning the ball over, a couple of fumbles, lost one of them, threw an interception, and was just missing open receivers all day long. Great defensive effort by Illinois in this one, by the way. Jabe Jacobs had 13 tackles, 6 solo, 2.5 of Illinois' 5 sacks of Jack Tuttle, and Matthew Bailey had an interception as well. So the Fighting Illini are another very good, people are just now discovering what Indiana is doing, and Illinois is right there. This is one of Brett Bielema's better teams, and they're fun to watch. By the way, one other note about the Illinois defense against Michigan. Michigan, fewest points they've scored in 10 years. They fall to 4-3. They've got Oregon, they've got Indiana, and they've got Ohio State still on the schedule. It's tough sledding for Sharon Moore and the Michigan Wolverines. By the way, feel free to comment, Michigan fan, Indiana fan, Illinois fan, Oregon fan. I want to hear from you on the comments on YouTube. Let's get it going here. And while I'm talking about that other stuff, don't forget we're on Twitter at X at Talk Big Ten, number 10. And don't forget our website, talkbig10.com, where we put all of our podcasts, and you can buy your own merchandise for your favorite teams, shirts, hats, t-shirts, all there for your convenience, lined up with all the podcasts. Again, that's at Talk Big Ten. I'd like to ask you to subscribe if you don't mind. I always ask listeners and viewers to subscribe. It helps us out. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't give us any personal information. It's just a click of a button. That's that simple. Subscribe, share, follow, and like Lockdown Big Ten wherever you get your podcast. That way you'll get the latest episode of this podcast as soon as it is available each and every day. All right. We continue talking about this weekend around the Big Ten. Why does USC keep losing 1-score games, giving up late scores? What's going on? 4 of their last 5 games, they've had leads in the second half. They're blowing them, and they're losing the games. We'll talk about that, take a trip around the rest of the Big Ten, and I'll have my top 10 Big Ten observations for the weekend. That's all coming up right here in 1 minute on Locked On Big Ten. I want to tell you about ZBiotics. ZBiotics. All right. It's a ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic mix. And it's a drink. And it's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It's invented by PhD scientists to tackle the rough mornings the day after some drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. And it's this byproduct that makes you feel icky the next day, not dehydration or anything else like that. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. And just remember, ZBiotics, make it your first drink of the night. Drink reasonably, and then you feel your best the next day. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnCollege and learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On College at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnCollege. So use the code LockedOnCollege at checkout for 15% off. Well, thank you, everybody, for making Locked On Big Ten your first listen each and every day, especially you everydayers out there. Thank you very much. Meanwhile, be sure to subscribe if you don't mind, and share and follow and like. You can subscribe here on YouTube if you're watching on video, and share and follow and like Locked On Big Ten, your team every day. And don't forget our website where everything is, all of our podcasts and the merchandise that you can buy if you want. Christmas is coming up around the corner at talkbig10.com, talkbig10.com. All right, let's try and figure out what the heck is wrong with the USC Trojans. They lose on the road at Maryland in a game in which they had won. They lose 29-28. Good job by Maryland, by the way. USC blows a 14-point lead, loses its third in a row. They've lost 4 of the last 5. They've lost those 4 by a total of 14 points. They've given up a late score in all those games. It cost them the game. To make matters worse, the Trojans could have had a game-sealing field goal at Maryland, go up by a couple of scores with about 2 minutes to go. Kick was blocked. Donnell Brown ended up blocking it for the Terps and kept them in the game, and they were able to go ahead and win it. It was a huge play, huge special teams play. Billy the Kid Edwards, 39 of 50 passes. He's icing on down that arm early this week. A career high 373 yards and 2 touchdown passes for Maryland. Caden Prather had a career high 9 catches for 111 yards. LeVane Scruggs, he had a momentum-changing interception in that game and returned it 51 yards. So offense, defense, special teams, all 3 phases, Mike Loxley's team coming together to get that win. Very impressive by the Terps. Very concerning for Lincoln Riley and the USC Trojans. Meanwhile, have you watched the Wisconsin Badgers lately? They've won 3 in a row. They beat Northwestern 23-3. Wisconsin's last 3 wins, not the best teams in the Big Ten. It's been Northwestern, Purdue, and Rutgers, but they have outscored them combined 117-16, 101 points. Pretty good. Tawee Walker had 126 yards. Last week he had 198, so the running game is rolling. Braden Locke threw a touchdown and ran for another in this game. By the way, beautiful autumn day there off the coast of shores of Lake Michigan. That was the last game of this year in that temporary Northwestern football stadium, 15,000 seat stadium there on campus, because they're rebuilding their real stadium, Ryan Field. Their next 2 games are going to move to a bigger venue because it's Ohio State and then Illinois. So, but then they'll do this again next year, presumably, because they have to wait till 2026 till they get their new stadium. And then the Badgers is getting on a little bit of a roll. We'll see how much of a roll they're really on. They host number 3 Penn State. That's coming up next. Congratulations to UCLA. UCLA, 35-32 winners at Rutgers, cross-country trip, all that's involved. They get their first Big Ten win. They were the last team to get a win in the Big Ten and conference play. By the way, Rutgers once upon a time was 4-0. They're now 4-3. We'll talk about that in a minute with what's going on. But Sean Foster, the Bruins, got a much-needed win snapping a 5-game losing streak. They had only beaten Hawaii in their season opener with a last-second field goal. In fact, UCLA was the last FBS team in the entire country to not crack 20 points in a game. They finally did that. Now, Rutgers scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to make this closer. But along the way, Ethan Garbers threw for 383 yards and 4 touchdowns. An outstanding day. Keegan Jones, 5 catches, 114 yards and a touchdown. And Molokai Matabao had 6 catches for 104 yards. And Brian Anderson had an interception. Now, let's talk about Rutgers and what's going on there. Kyle Monangai rushed for 106 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's what he did. That was not the problem. Keontae Hamilton had a sack and a half on the defense. But it's the Rutgers defense I want to look at here. This was a staple of this team. Now, they've had an injury or two, a key injury or two. Poor tackling. This defense, which was once considered good, has given up 77 points in the last 2 weeks. I think that's your problem. That's your problem right there. And then Saturday night under the lights, the Iowa Hawkeyes were at Michigan State. Michigan State wins this game 32-20. They were coming off a bye week. It looks like Jonathan Smith got some work done here. Aiden Childs looked better. It was his best game of the year. I think, off the top of my head, only 1 interception. He's had a couple 3 interception games. So that was good. And, they needed a bye. They had back-to-back games against Oregon and Ohio State. So you need a break from that. So, coaches have a saying that you can't win games when you're always settling for field goals instead of touchdowns, unless you're Michigan State. They set a school record. Jonathan Kim kicked a Spartans record 6 field goals. And Aiden Childs threw for 256 yards and a touchdown. Michigan State wins the game 32-20. Big win over Iowa. Couple of shout-outs to Nick Marsh, who had 8 catches and 113 yards. Montori Foster Jr. had 5 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown. And Nakai Martinez had an interception. The Spartans snapped a 3-game skid, starting to play a little better. I thought they played okay at Boston College a few weeks ago before they had to play Oregon and Ohio State. And they just, 2 made turnovers in the rain. So I see some signs there for the Spartans that they're getting better. That's the key. I mean, they've lost some games the past couple of weeks, but they're getting better before the bye. The loss for the Hawkeyes was a disappointment. Caleb Johnson, who was the second leading rusher in the country, was held to just 98 yards and 15 carries. Actually, that's a pretty good day. But for him, it's not. He can bust off almost 200 at any given and 75 of those 98 came on one play, on a 75-yard play. Cohen Entriger had an interception for the Spartans as well. All right, so that was a huge weekend. We had a lot of teams with bye weeks. We'll start getting fewer and fewer teams with bye weeks, more and more teams, more and more games over the weekend. Got a big weekend coming up already for week 9, if you can believe it. But we're not done with week 8, because in a minute, I'm going to give you my top 10 Big Ten observations from the weekend. We'll see if you agree with the list. Maybe I left some. I'm always afraid of leaving somebody off. That's where you guys come in. You'll let me know in the comments for sure. All that's coming up. Our top 10 Big Ten observations next, right here on Locked On Big Ten. Get the Game Time app, and you can get tickets to anything. Game Time. They make it so easy. Upfront pricing. No mystery add-ons later. It's all right there. Download the Game Time app on your phone. You can get tickets to Big Ten football games. Big Ten basketball's coming. Upcoming NBA, World Series, all that stuff. NFL, all that stuff. Get all the tickets. And then it's not just sports. Game Time can get you tickets. If someone has a ticket, they can get it. It's comedy shows around the corner from where you live, theater, all that, concerts, and of course the sports. Get all the tickets at Game Time. Very easy to use. Game Time has their lowest price guarantee, or they will credit you 110% of the difference on the price. And your purchase is covered by the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. That's all with Game Time. All right, it's time for my top 10 Big Ten observations from the weekend, and we'll put this up on screen one at a time. If you're on audio only, and by the way, big jump in the audio only podcast listeners. I know we do the video on YouTube and then wherever you get your podcasts on audio, big jump lately. Thank you for that, by the way. Continue to share and follow and like, and it helps us out. All right, I'm going to put this on screen, and we'll go full screen, and we'll check this out here. First shout out, our top 10 observation. I want to give a shout out to the Illinois defense for holding Michigan to just 7 points. That was a pretty impressive effort. And I know, look, Michigan has struggled offensively, but that Illinois defense was all over them throughout the entire game. I wanted to mention them here in our observations from the weekend. And at number 9, same thing with the Indiana defense. Yeah, everybody notices Indiana scoring 50 points and 500 yards of offense, which we may mention in a minute here as we get higher up on our list, but held Nebraska to 7 points. Dylan Raiola, 3 interceptions. Just a great day by the Indiana defense. All right, here, and by the way, they got good players. Everybody pays attention to the offense, but the defense is pretty good. Want to give a shout out to the Michigan State receivers. Just talked about Nick Marsh and his 8-catch day for 113 yards, and Montorie Foster, 5 catches, 100 yards and a touchdown there against Iowa on the Saturday night NBC Big Ten Saturday night game. By the way, I love the fact that the Big Ten is just showcased on NBC every Saturday night in prime time. That's just, of all the TV deals out there, I think that one's fantastic for the Big Ten. Speaking of Michigan State, their kicker, Jonathan Kim, again, a school record, 6 field goals. Usually if you're kicking field goals all the time, you're not winning, but he kicked so many. It's 6. It was ridiculously good against Iowa. All right, at number 6, let's give a shout out to the UCLA Bruins for their first Big Ten win, first conference win. And Ethan Garbers, who he missed a game, he was hurt, was ineffective coming back, maybe a little early, and then all of a sudden, boom, 383 yards and 4 touchdowns this weekend. Great job by him and the UCLA Bruins in that game. At number 5, again, a shout out to Wisconsin for their 3 straight wins, where I mentioned they've outscored the 3 opponents by 101 points altogether. We'll see how they do against Penn State this weekend. Meanwhile, Maryland football at number 4. I could have done a lot of individual things here, but I decided to do the team thing as it came from behind, down 2 scores to beat Southern Cal, beat USC. Donnell Brown, first of all, with the block. Also, Billy Edwards, 50 pass attempts, 2 touchdown passes, 373 yards in the game. Caden Prather, the 9 catches and 111 yards. Fantastic job by Maryland. They really needed that win because their record was, took a few losses here over the last month, and they're a better team than that. So they got a much needed win. Meanwhile, the Indiana offense that I mentioned, getting 40 points and 400 yards a game is no big. That's what they do. And they topped both of it, almost 500 yards and scored over 50 points against a pretty good Nebraska defense that had not allowed a rushing touchdown all year. Indiana got 5. I think that's the stat of the week right there. At number 2, I love those faux leather helmets that Illinois wore. I wish they wear them all the time. From the era of the Galloping Ghost, I thought that artist did each helmet hand painted, 2 hours each. Been working on it for a while to commemorate the 100th year anniversary of the stadium and everything going on out there at Illinois in their win over Michigan. And then my number 1 observation, well, if you're number 1 in the country, you got to be number 1 in this. The Oregon Ducks, Big Ten. Welcome to the Big Ten, by the way, Oregon. Number 1 team in the country, and also got to give them a shout out for the shutout at Purdue. Pretty good. That's a pretty good list. Did I leave anybody out? Let me know. You can hit me up at Twitter at X at Talk Big Ten. Also, get the comments going back and forth on YouTube, if you will. That really helps us out, by the way. Go back and forth. Rivals, comments, other people's comments, comment on other comments. We love it. Do that right there on YouTube as well. And don't forget, you can check us out at our website, talkbig10.com. That's with the number 10, talkbig10.com. All of our podcasts go there chronologically. This one will go up there as well. And then you can go back, catch up on some things we talked about. Your favorite team, they're grouped by schools as well. And while you're there, you might as well get yourself some new shirts, hats, and pennants, and T-shirts, and coffee mugs with your school logo on it, all right there for your convenience. Again, talkbig10.com. It's going to be a big week. We'll wrap up a couple other thoughts from this past weekend with a few select teams that I want to talk about, and then we're going to turn the page and start steamrolling it toward week 9 this weekend with a big slate of Big Ten games. We're very excited about all of that. Before you go, be sure to subscribe and follow this podcast right now on your favorite podcast app. That way you'll get the latest episode of Locked On Big Ten as soon as it becomes available each and every day. Thanks for checking us out. Can't wait to talk again tomorrow. There's a lot of great stuff. We're in the thick of it here in the Big Ten season for college football. I'm Craig Sheeman for Locked On Big Ten. Talk to you next time.